Okay, epigenetics, microbiome, at least you guys are seeing what's in the book right now. And medicine, without further ado. Okay, we're starting with Hippocrates. Wherever the art of medicine is loved, there is also a love of humanity. We're on the same page with inflammation, stressors, chronic disease, microbiome, and epigenetics. Before the wild habits, just one more investigation. What is medicine? We have thousands of years of habit wisdom reinvigorated by modern biohackers. And we have current reductionist studies on synthesizing chemicals into drugs to alter physiology. If you're tapped into your senses in nature, a rewilded human, medicine is everywhere, from your own mind to walking outside to harvesting invasive weeds in your ecosystem. If you have symptoms or a disease of chronic inflammation, you may be more fragile to promises of drugs marketed by pharmaceutical companies, driven by profit for shareholders. Medicinal drugs often have side effects, and in some countries, like the United States, are marketed directly to citizens as miracle cures. Positive stressors are habits that have side benefits. What is your next medicine? Unregulated. On Lex Friedman's podcast with family physician turned public health policy professor for Harvard Medical School, John Abramson, they discuss the problems Big Pharma is creating in society, including why doctors push drugs rather than coach lifestyle upgrades. Here are clips from the interview. Lex Friedman. There's an entire mechanism established for testing drugs. There isn't an entire mechanism established in terms of scientific rigor for testing lifestyle changes. Money can buy ignorance, I suppose, in science. Abramson. Money can buy blinders that are on, that don't look outside the reductionist model. And that is another issue. Nobody says to doctors in training, only listen to reductionist studies and conclusions and methods of promoting health. Nobody says that explicitly. But the respectable science has to do with controlling the factors. It just doesn't make sense to me to allow a drug to be advertised as preventing cardiovascular disease when you haven't included lifestyle changes as an arm in the study. It's just so crystal clear that the purpose of the study is to sell the drug. It's not to prevent cardiovascular disease. If I were in charge, I would try to convince you that anywhere the results of that study were presented to physicians, it would be stamped in big red letters, this study did not compare the drug to lifestyle changes. The doctors are trained to kind of forget that that's not there. Later in the conversation about his book, Overdosed America, Abramson clarifies that the government institutions meant to protect public health, like the FDA, are currently mechanized to protect Big Pharma. Now we know why drugs can't get to the root generation of chronic inflammation, but can alter how the body responds to chronic inflammatory habits. But how overdosed are we? And does that hinder reversing chronic? I do find this really useful. It's actually helped me, and I had 2 podcast interviews yesterday, and knowing this stuff to me was actually helpful. It's helpful for a number of reasons. Like, say you're talking to someone and their kid has just been put on an asthma medication. You might want to know the larger context in which that's happening. And to me, that's why it's so important that you guys really study the list of the symptoms of chronic inflammation so that you can start to separate what's chronic inflammation from what's more of an acute situation. So understanding because almost everything's chronic. I mean, that's the, that's the problem. Okay, Pharmaceutic. 70% of Americans take at least 1 prescription medication, more than half take 2. The most common prescriptions are antibiotics, antihypertensives, it's for heart, cardio, antidepressants, and opioid painkillers. The generational split is around 30% of adolescents, 50% of adults, 85% of elders. Humans as a species are drugged at epidemic inflationary rates. Elders are the easiest target for drug companies. Aging with symptoms and diseases of chronic inflammation is horrible, and drugs for the elderly are generally covered by taxpayer dollars. Because drugs don't sell themselves, the drug makers buy media in the form of advertising, which in the US is largely unregulated. Drug makers advertise drugs through television and other media to encourage patients to ask their doctors for specific medications. Almost half of all ad dollars centered on prescription drugs to treat chronic conditions like arthritis, diabetes, and depression. If you've been exposed to mainstream advertising lately, you're well aware of the gloom to bloom. That's the name of these ads. They're called gloom to bloom ads. Has anyone seen a gloom to bloom ad lately? Yeah, gloom to bloom. The psych ops to persuade people to buy drugs. The blue blood industries grew up together. Cures and Curses, a history of pharmaceutical advertising in America, describes how the situation developed. The boom of the US pharmaceutical industry not only paralleled that of the US advertising industry, the two were deeply intertwined. Patent medicine manufacturers pioneered modern American advertising, which we can continue to see today in both pharmaceuticals and other commercial markets. This article is really fascinating. It's actually a blog post, this Cures and Curses, a history of pharmaceutical advertising. It does like 100-year scope on the coevolution of those industries. I didn't know anything about it until I started looking into it, and it was like, oh, no wonder. Okay, the conglomeration of the food industry, advertising industry, big pharma, and healthcare, and big media make short-term gains for stockholders at the expense of overdosing the population. While these trends are shepherded by the US, the trend is global. Shareholders profit while the species degenerates. The lack of integrity in big picture solutions lead to physiological and psychological breakdown at the epigenetic and genetic level. Hippocrates is not impressed. Okay, this is what I really want to get into, guys, is how can drugs work for chronic? Can drugs work for chronic inflammation? Or not? Or do they need to be coupled to be effective to work with the root cause of the inflammation? And that's really, and I'm not anti-drug, you guys. I know it sounds like I am, and I wanted to read this to see how much I need to tone this down, because I do feel like I need to tone it down a little bit. But the thing is we need to understand the difference between chronic inflammation and acute. Chronic disease and acute. Okay, drugs for chronic. Modern medical was actually built to treat acute rather than conquer chronic. Drugs are fabulous for acute conditions, accidents, injuries, surgeries, acute infections. For chronic inflammation is habit-driven. Drugs not used in concert with lifestyle changes will largely subvert symptoms and layer on side effects. Drugs from antibiotics to antidepressants, including SSRIs, to opioids, to anti-inflammatories, the NSAIDs, to vaccines. These drugs wreak havoc on the microbiome. Drugs cause dysbiosis, promoting more inflammation, hindering digestion, dulling emotional sensitivity, and come with specific unrelated side effects. See microbiome. Because in microbiome, that's the chapter where we really get into dysbiosis. And so people can start to identify symptomology in the different microbiomes of the body, not just gut, not just colon, but also sinus, mouth, lung, skin, etc. Okay. Frustrations of pharmaceutical medicine is that it is indeed allopathic, driven to medicating disease rather than holistic or driving towards health. It's not the same thing. The call to action is to trade habits of chronic inflammation and drugs of conventional complexity for artful simplicity. Human maturation is designed to be a cooperative, not combative, experience. Dysbiosis dysregulates the emotions and vice versa. When you take into account the human is already entrenched in the habits of chronic inflammation with negative bias, you increase the chance of infection or disease attraction and systems destabilization, see stressors. Which is why people on a drug end up on more than one drug. When you use drugs for chronic inflammation without habit coaching, you delay the volatility already in the system. By delaying volatility, you layer on even more allostatic load, see chronic. Like suppressing forest fires, you set the stage for catastrophic destruction later. Like printing money, you paper over the errors a responsive market could correct. You preference not changing now, which pushes more suffering into your future. Drugs for chronic can't heal, see heal. It's a first-order deception. They're making us seem like we're a little better, often due to the increasing complexities known as the placebo effect and relief of symptoms in the short term. Again, drugs are not tested against diet and lifestyle habit upgrades for efficacy. Symptoms of chronic inflammation are meant to force our hand to wake up, to develop anti-fragile habits of resilience, to make you ask yourself, what would it take to half my allostatic load, half my calories, half my carbs, including alcohol, half the time fiddling with my phone when I don't have time to meditate? Rewiring habits is the way out of the pain cave. Thinking a wonder drug is your solution for inflammation without doing the work of fast, walk, sip, exhale, focus screws up your relationship with reality. You miss the wake-up calls to your current fragility. You screw your future self. A Ulysses contract is what you make to bind to your own better future. Wild habits shift your mindset towards the positive so you can preference your future self over your current habits, leading to breakthroughs. From your deathbed, you want to look back and say, I gave it my best shot. I was humble enough to learn what experience taught me. My breakdowns led to breakthroughs. When you zoom out your perspective, we're one species on one special planet. The one-size-fits-all approach to conquer chronic are the wild habits and the body thrive habits. Our strategy to reverse chronic and engage your edge is positive stressor habits that reactivate circadian rhythm and nourish the microbiome terrain. Personalized. Okay, this gets a little bit into body type. Svadhyaya, you're designed to uphold a highly organized environment within your cells as you age through the decades. You're designed to be relaxed, self-directed, and to activate an inflammatory response only for acute crises. The yogis prioritize self-study as essential to optimizing yourself. See Sanskrit, Svadhyaya. With self-study, you double down on what is working and delete what isn't. You swing the pendulum to get pulsation. See hunger, channels. You ditch conventional habits if they generate chronic, as in chronic inflammation. The long-standing truth from ancient medicine is self-study. Learn from yesterday to smarten up today. Even for the biohackers, wild habits may challenge your beliefs, test the habits, verify from your experience. See urine, snort, swish, trip. To thrive, you must be organized. Wild habits organize you, same with body thrive habits, organize you internally, within yourself, your cells, your microbiome, even your virome. Your nature co-evolved with nature. Wild habits also organize you externally, with your people and your place, through aligning rhythm, see rhythm and ritual. Which unconventional habits are your best medicine? Let's find out. We'll start with the most medicinal of habits. Fasting is medicine. All right, I'm just going to return once more to the initial Hippocrates statement. Wherever the art of medicine loved, there's also a love of humanity. All right, so that's medicine. It's just really understanding that if chronic inflammation is driven by habit, then it has to be reversed by habit, right? So if you have, say a person's 40 pounds overweight, say they're staying up too late at night, say they're not sleeping very well, say they're eating 5 times a day, say they don't have a fasting rhythm, say they're kind of dehydrated because they love caffeine and they love their wine at night. Can the pill fix it? Because you watch the gloom to bloom, right? And it like looks really promising, doesn't it? Like just ask your doctor about this. It's easy. You can do it. You can take a pill. Microbiome, epigenetics, nitric oxide, all the stuff you guys have heard me talk about in the last 6 months, to sort of help people better understand, including like all of us, really better understand like why things why these habits work, why they're not going away, why they're critically important, but also to help us understand that the human species is actually degenerating, much in the way that Tress is currently describing, and that the pharmaceuticals, unfortunately, because of their disruption to the microbiome, are driving that. So a disrupted microbiome leads to dementia. It decreases cognitive function. So that means people are less able to learn later in life. And if our elders are on at least 2 medications, right, the results are like, yeah, you're still alive, but you're not learning. And we think that's normal now. Now we just think that's normal elder behavior. That's not normal elder behavior. Like normal elder behaviors, you keep learning. You keep learning and growing. Like neuroplasticity is not supposed to just like go down. And you see this with like people that are healthy. Like you see this with elders that are healthy, is they want to be engaged. They want to have intergenerational relationships. All right, the gut microbiome is the largest producer of serotonin. Serotonin makes you feel good. So if the microbiome in the gut is depressed, like that means there's depression in the system. And what I mean by depressed is depressed from releasing serotonin or producing serotonin. All right, so I'm going to read the symptoms of chronic inflammation in your body. Fatigue, stubborn belly fat, cellulite, man boobs, spare tires, difficulty sleeping, excess body weight, feeling stuck, heavy, stagnant, or dull, tongue coating, joint pain, stiffness upon arising, poor digestion, belly bloat, irregular stools, loose stools, constipation, heartburn, indigestion, bad breath, skin issues, rashes, hives, acne, psoriasis, eczema, allergies, including food allergies, cravings for processed food or food of poor nutrient density, PMS, fibrocystic breasts and hard periods, puffiness, water retention, sinus congestion, lymph congestion, snot, mucus, postnasal drip, emotional eating or overeating, headaches, susceptibility to illnesses, viruses, flus, candida or fungi, high blood pressure, lack of sex drive. Okay, so that's body. Now in your mind, again, symptoms of chronic inflammation, overwhelm, anxiety, chronic low-grade stress, depression, irritability, brain fog, difficulty sleeping, feeling stuck, heavy, stagnant, or dull, difficulty making decisions, poor willpower, unmotivated, low ambition, headaches, mental confusion, poor concentration, or difficulty focusing. In your soul, lack of drive, lack of direction, complacency, hopelessness, overwhelm, unclear direction, disconnect from meaning in your life, feeling trapped, and consumerism. All right, it's like allergies are part of this. So we need to know what these things are. So as people are describing them, and it kind of gets obvious, and you start to think what I think, which is like, oh my gosh, everything's chronic inflammation, which when you look at the numbers overall is true. Again, with the the allergy medication, it's designed to do a few things. Often it's trying to like dry up the channels so you don't have mucus. So if someone has like a Vata type allergy and it's caused by underlying dryness, then that's a problem. Say someone's overeating and their body's producing too much mucus, because that's what the body will do with too much food, and you just take the antihistamines and that dries up the body. Now you're going to have more challenged digestion and you're going to have, dryness in the channel. So it's like, well, how are your allergies? Well, my allergies are better because I'm not constantly dripping mucus all the time or blowing my nose. But it's like, so what we really want to look at is why is with allergies, why is my body out of sync with my ecosystem if the person's allergic to their ecosystem? That could be pollen, that could be dust, that could be dogs, that could be cats, that could be horses, that could be, you know, specific plants, ragweed, etc. And if it's food allergies, it could be the food isn't food, right? So that's a big part right now. Like, say the person's eating, you know, they buy their bread at the grocery store. Well, most bread at the grocery store it's not heirloom wheat, so it's been hybridized. It's been grown with glyphosates, so it could be disrupting their their entire like gut absorption, and they could go to leaky gut, which is super common, which is why all the digestive issues are there. So it's like, it's really kind of complicated on one hand, but what I keep going to is like, what's the radical simplicity? It's like, well, we've got to find real nourishment, and we've got to be really connected with our ecosystem. Bye, guys. Namaste.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.